If you're a student in college or university who is investing, or your parents are investing fifty to $70,000, whether of their hard-earned money or through debt, in this video, I'm going to break down how you can probably use that money to have a way better start and foundation for your life. So I was doing some research on student debt, and I also spoke with a young gentleman recently from Boston University, and he was studying economics. Although that is a very noble and great degree, which could lead to lots of other great things, he wasn't super enthusiastic about it. Um, this guy, was about 18 or 19 years old. I believe he was a sophomore, so maybe he was 20, and just knew that in the summers, whenever he did drywalling, he's a drywaller, or framing and stuff like that. He did like some labor work, that he knew he was making tons of cash and that he could do something with that. He just didn't know how. And when I started telling him how, how little money could go a long way in real estate, he started, getting really jazzed up about it. So I just wanted to break down some of that conversation, that we had. And as you probably already know, there's a lot of debt being thrown around, especially for students. And in some ways, they're being fleeced. They're almost like small mortgages, like especially once you graduate from college, that mortgage could be, excuse me, that debt, that student debt could take about 25 or more years to pay off. And this particular student that I was speaking with, him or his parents, I wasn't clear on what was going on, were spending about $75,000 per year for his economics degree at Boston University. And it just made me think of some crazy thoughts about how, if he's a sophomore and he really doesn't like it now, then he probably should drop out. This might be like the last year to really decide on it. And I think, showing people another way, and talking about it is a conversation that, you really should have with, your son or your daughter or yourself, if you're watching this and you're really questioning, do I really want to rack up almost $300,000 worth of debt at the age of 22 before I even start earning money? I mean, right out of college, I mean, unless you're lawyer, doctor, by the way, those are very longer degrees. If you're not going to school for a degree that matches the job title, if your if your job name doesn't match your degree name, then chances are you're probably going to have a little bit more of a difficult time, racking through, just juggling the job market, and figuring out in 4 years, within 4 years, like what you're going to do. You might have a great idea, and there's going to be some people that are like helping you along the way. Um, but if you don't like what you're studying, and you don't even know if you want a job in the field that you're going to school in, then by freshman or sophomore year, I think it's time to have a serious conversation with your parents. So I think with this guy that I was talking with, he had a father that worked in construction, so clearly hands-on type of family. And I started chatting him up about how, he could leverage all that money, to start investing in real estate. So some of the hard questions that, you know, I was asking him was, what kind of life do you want? And do you actually want to travel? Do you want to have a little bit more freedom? And do you want to have that sooner rather than later? And in your early 20s, a lot of us are guided down a path of like, you have to graduate from college or university to land that really big job. And these are tales as old as time. Um, Ever since reading any financial advisement book or anything by Robert Kiyosaki, or um, I mean, essentially, college is holding you back. It does give you a job. You could find a job right out of college, and it can be great. Um, but the amount of money that I was trying to tell this young man, with $70,000, you could really do some damage. And my first start was 15K down in my mid 30s, by the way, when I finally started executing uh, my savings. I think that $70,000, you could really buy a lot of property. So I have more of a presentation, I think, that would color this a little bit better. So let's go over to that. All right. So different setup here, but I wanted to present this in a better way so you can see me, see this. And I've recorded this 3 times. So this is test number 4. Let's see if we can do it great this time. So what I wanted to outline for you is the traditional path versus a potential, your potential path. Okay, so having that 70K year tuition, 300K, around 300K that can follow you for decades, because sometimes there's debt forgiveness or maybe there's not, you fall through the cracks. And, if you're starting out college with, out of college with an entry level job, you're not going to crush this debt right away unless your parents help you. I mean, I'm just saying, like, do you want that for your parents? Do your parents enjoy paying your exorbitant amount of debt? Not everyone is as lucky as some of these people that are going, having everything, handed over to them on a silver platter. So what I want to do is I want to help that person that's, somewhere stuck in the middle, of all this debt. Right out of college, finding like a good job, that'll pay off that debt. It's going to be, it's a little challenging, people skills, you have to like really develop, kind of like how to sell yourself, interview for jobs, find the right job. That's like all new stuff. No one ever teaches you how to do that the right way. So it's hard. It takes a while. It could take like 10 or 20 years before you have an income that actually could pay that off in a reasonable amount of time. And my suggestion with this video is taking that freshman, sophomore year and taking a moment, in those first 2 years of college or university, really pausing and thinking, could I stop now? And, on the right here, and just do like a 4 to 12 week course for phlebotomy, electrical engineer, plumber, or like a certified nurse assistant, start making 50K per year or more, by the way. Some of those certification kind of jobs really beat those minuscule, minimum wage jobs, you know, and living with your roommates or your family could save you like a ton of money. And the goal here is to save just enough money to start investing in real estate. So I put 10 to 20K, but as you go along and as time goes on, that number could change. I'm just saying, like, this is an idea, so if it's 10 to 20K, you're essentially putting aside 10% of whatever you're earning. Now, I'm just like, this is without taxes or anything. So just easy numbers, and my main suggestion in this video is going to be, using 3.5% down, loan. It's called an FHA loan for your first multifamily property. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now you must know there's going to be plenty of other videos, plenty of other courses, plenty of other books to read. But, if I were to summarize into what I would suggest you look into is 3 things for real estate. And that is, let's move. Can I move this? I can't move my picture. All right, cool. I'm going to keep it there. Is 1, wholesaling. It's good people skills. You're really cold calling people and you're learning how to sell, and what that is you're essentially connecting investors to buyers. Excuse me, investors to sellers, buyers to sellers. You're the middleman and you're earning a profit for that. Sometimes it's $5,000, sometimes it's $10,000. I've met women who've been doing it for years, and they've made $500,000 just wholesaling for commercial properties. So it's some pretty serious money that you can be, because commercial properties, it could be like a multi-million-dollar property, like tens or tens of millions of dollars just to like buy a property, and you having a piece of that purchase price, can change your life. So, if that interests you, study up on wholesaling. Tax liens and tax deeds is another really important avenue to kind of like explore. Essentially what you're doing is you're helping communities or towns or cities relieve them of properties or owners that aren't paying their taxes, and it can be, there are places in the United States where it could just be like short money, like a couple $100 or like a few $1,000s. So that $10,000 or $20,000 that you're saving up, you could buy, 5 or 10, properties, tax liens. And what happens is, if the owners don't repay their taxes and whatever, that property forecloses into your name. It's a long game. Tax liens can be, 1 to 3 year wait time, but tax deeds are a little bit quicker. They can happen like right away. You go to an auction, you buy a tax deed, and it's yours. But that's only for property. Those are like really bad. It's like properties that like really no one wants, and it could be really good, by the way. But those tax deeds means in some cases that property has been in foreclosure. It's been like, a very derelict property, 7 years down the line, no one's paid attention to it for nearly 7 years, like maybe 5 years, and it's just really bad. So it depends on you can fix and flip that into someone, for someone else to develop it. You don't know. And the one that I choose, or the one that I chose, and the one I encourage, and it's the easiest one that makes the most sense, is the buy and hold. We're going to get into this a little bit more. Is purchasing a multifamily property, 3.5% down. It's your first property. You only have one chance for this. Once you do it once, you can never do it ever again for the rest of your life. And so it's a huge. It sounds stressful. It's not, but after that, as long as if it's your primary residence, you use the property as your primary residence. You can always use an FHA loan as a primary residence for like 5% down. I think maybe even, depending on your credit score and all that stuff, could be 10% down. I forget, but because I've never done that. But 3.5% down, yeah, that's pretty wild. So 100, it's not going to happen. But right, well, excuse me, for like a property that's like super cheap, $100,000, maybe $50,000, you could be spending 1,500 or 3,000, $3,500, easy, just quick calculations, just to buy a property. So goal is to fix it up, rent it out for a little bit more money, and just create some cash flows. In the next slide, I just want to break that up. This is essentially what I did. I found a small multifamily property and invested about 3.5% down. In my case, it was about $400,000. So the down payment was around $15,000, and fixed it up. I did spend a little money on that, but I mean, wasn't a lot. It doesn't need more than paint or some new, little things around the place. And right away started renting within 6 months. I'm just ballparking here, but I started earning around $5,000. Now that's not including the mortgage, but it's easy to start thinking about this. Like my mortgage was short money as well, but as long as you're hitting the mortgage, like as long as the renters are paying for your mortgage, now you're starting to build equity for free. So within 1 to 2 months or more, you could wait as long as you want. You could wait 2 years, you could wait 2 months. You can cash out, refinance that, and start investing in the next property. How does this work for you as a student? Well, if you're really aggressive, you could do this every 1 to 2 months. Now, I don't suggest that, right away, but, within the first year, you could do it twice. You wait 6 months, go at your own pace, and cash out, refinance, do the next property, and, start the cycle once more. It's like rinse, wash, rinse, repeat. You just do that over and over again. Now, what I wanted to explain to you, which is like what I explained to the student in economics, is with that $15,000 initial payment, nothing else, ideally, you could be generating 100, maybe even $200,000 within. Now that says 12 months, but I would say within around 24 months, you can make some pretty serious money. Now, ideally, let's say you just skip freshman and sophomore year and you have no student debt, you're right out of high school. You could do this at 18 years old and start really crushing, like just making more money, for your daytime job, and then squirreling some of that money away, 10% of your income. You could start investing in some things that could change your life. Now, in comparison to, your college friends, they're waking up 4 years later, maybe even later, if they're going to school for something greater, like a master's or something like that, they could have 100,000. I don't know how much, it varies from person to person. I don't know how much their parents help them pay, but it could be a pretty substantial amount of money. $100,000 is really nothing these days. I mean, what if you have like two or $300,000 worth of student debt, and then your entry level, job is around 60 or 70K. What's the deal with that? You know, you're going to be struggling to pay off this. By the way, no one tells you this, but like, student debt, it's like a 25-year note. It's like a 25-year mortgage. You're basically chained to this mortgage for a really long time unless you really pay it down aggressively. And I mean, yeah, you could be struggling to do that, but I mean, I guess you could do it, but you really have to like save your money. Why not just drop out of college? That's what I said to this guy. And by the time your friends have graduated, you've already created enough income to make you a millionaire within the 10 years that they're struggling to pay off their debt. I mean, that makes more sense to me. And, along the way, you're going to be, learning some real, like, practical education. And I think just like talking to people, figuring things out, like how you're really going to be, juggling this business that you're creating and taking some serious action. So essentially just, buying that first property, is the primary focus. Whether it's, all those other options are great, that I outlined for you, and it's important to educate yourself. But buying a property, buy and hold multi is my highest suggestion. So let's move back over to the other microphone. All right. So, anyways, you can do all this stuff before you even turn 25 years old. You're well on your way to becoming a multi-millionaire, whatever you want to do. It doesn't even have to be a ton of money. That's another, step in the road, to take. Once you have all that money, you could be starting a family, buying a ton of land, or you can just go back to school and study some very noble venture like becoming a doctor or a lawyer, or whatever, medieval museum management studies you want to do. And or you could just goof off the rest of your life. Being trapped in student debt for a long time and kind of navigating that and having like a fixed, having like a debt like that over your head, can really suck, to be honest with you. So that's kind of the picture I wanted to paint for you. But I'll leave you with this: if you're in your college and you're not sure, if you're in college and you're not sure why, and the cost doesn't match like the payoff, uh, you've got skills, you like to work hard, and you just want more out of life, then you start asking some better questions of what you want to do. Start talking to some people. Start talking to your parents, seeing if this really works for you, and don't wait. Don't wait. Even if it's like you can always take a break from college and see what else works for you, and you can always go back to college. So if then any of that information resonated with you, if you liked what I said, it's kind of hard heading, but subscribe, follow along, because the next video I'm going to show you how I used an FHA loan to buy that first property, and I'll try to break that down for you step by step. So thank you and have a great rest of your night.